Hello, I'm Grady, and this is my TED Talk. And I'll just jump into it. Ever since I can remember, I've always wanted to be a sports writer. Watching sports with my brother was always a great way to pass time. It was always a way of bonding for us since we've always been close, and sports are surely a thing for most of why we're so close. Before the days of being able to read any sports article that I could ever want to read on my phone, I remember listening to the local sports stations via the radio on my little MP3 player that I had as a kid, and hearing all of the latest chatter about all my Dallas teams from my room. Pure bliss ensued as I dreamt of the day that I could write about sports. Through my time at Regis University, I have been an English major all the way, as my desire for writing has never once wavered, but my main passion still lies in the field of sports journalism since I've never really dreamt of anything else. I knew I wanted to be a writer, but sports writing has always been the field that I want to enter. All of this has had me asking myself, what makes a good sports writer? Right off the bat, it sounds like an easy question, but the more I ponder it, the more the mystery grows. So for my TED Talk, I would like to discuss what I think makes a good sports writer, listing qualities I need to hopefully become a quality sports writer someday. The first quality that comes to mind is impartiality. Um, it's certainly one of the major qualities that you need to have, especially if one hopes to write about a team that is not one that that person grew up watching. As I mentioned, I'm a fan of Dallas teams since that is where I'm from. So when I think of all the rivals that, for example, the Dallas Cowboys have, I begin to get nervous as being impartial to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles or the Green Bay Packers or the Pittsburgh Steelers. It makes me wince with great pain. But it is certainly one of the most important aspects of being a sports journalist, as you certainly do not always get to write for the market that you grew up in. The interesting thing about sports is that um, fans are never expected to be impartial, and why should they be? They're there to see their team beat up on whoever they're facing, but the journalist needs to be able to report on that game, showing plenty of emotion without appearing to take sides, since, as I know all too well, once a journalist takes a perceived slight at a team, then those fans are more than prepared to tear into them about that. When you let your rooting emotions get the best of you, you run the risk of missing something important data-wise or just coming across as plain unprofessional. Another important part is to be impartial to players as well. There are times when players and journalists don't get along too well, with journalists sometimes asking questions on very touchy subjects, especially after losses or something like that. So it is extremely important to roll with the punches and not let a single answer change your view of that player. Empathy is another important aspect of a sports writer's job, as coaches and athletes can be a rather capricious bunch. This is why it is of utmost importance for the writer to craft their approach carefully when interviewing, because one single misplaced word can set off a chain reaction that includes a viral response for all the wrong reasons. This is certainly something that I've always been keen on, since I've always marveled at the reporters that are able to ask incredible questions to the side that lost and get a respectful answer out of it. And it is generally because the reporter's demeanor was quiet and respectful, so walking on eggshells is certainly an essential aspect of what makes a good sports journalist. Creativity is also something that is very expected uh, in the world of sports writing and in the world of writing in general. Since the best writers are always looking for a new and fresh angle to take on a certain subject instead of hashing out the same formulaic articles that drone on and on, it is very easy for certain storylines to get beaten like a dead horse in the sports world, so it is very important to take the road less traveled when talking about certain topics, since nobody wants to read the same slop of words over and over. When I think about this, I mainly think of the difficulty in recapping a game in a new way, since obviously there are only so many takes that can be had for a single game. So it's definitely important to stay fresh and find the angles that nobody else has found yet. And flexibility, which might be the most important aspect of sports journalism, since the job naturally comes with odd working hours, And as we all know too well at the moment with our current pandemic, events are always subject to change, whether it be weather related or current event related, like we're experiencing now. Anything can happen at the drop of a hat. Plus, things like overtime, extra innings, or what have you can always impact deadlines. So, oftentimes, for a sports writer, the deadline will be set at midnight regardless of how long the game drags on. So, it is important for them, a good sports writer, to be able to create a good piece even if they only have 45 minutes left till the deadline, which is something that worries me since that is quite a demanding aspect of the job. Versatility, it's also very important when covering sports. So a writer needs to be able to write several different types of pieces, be it feature stories, game recaps, previews, etc. Last but not least, adaptability. It's definitely one of the major aspects to the job. Uh, the advancement of technology over the past few decades, it's certainly enhanced the 24-hour news cycle, and it has certainly enhanced it in the sports world. People used to get their sports-related news from the newspaper or their local radio stations or just watching late-night news, but nowadays, sports news, it's readily available at your fingertips with our phones, so it's very important to keep that machine going. Instant updates are a necessity to keeping the fan up to date on what's happening in the game. So being able to effectively multitask when covering games is very, very important. So things such as being able to tweet out brief commentary and writing in-game blogs, all while taking notes on the game itself for the actual recap. That can become a balancing act real fast and is definitely one of the more daunting aspects of it. So being technologically proficient and making all this happen, it's quite essential. One writer that's always intrigued me has been Woody Paige. He was a writer for the Denver Post for 35 years. Before that, he was a writer for the Rocky Mountain News, and he now writes for the Gazette in Colorado Springs. And he's interesting since he also has a role on Around the Horn, a show on ESPN. So I guess you can consider him a TV personality if you want. But he's far different from the usual sports personalities like Stephen A. Smith or Skip Bayless, where they make it their job to have incredibly hot takes that border on being insane at times. So Woody's a nice contrast to that in that he only reveals what he believes instead of playing up a character, which I admire. There are obviously so many qualities that make a good sports writer that listing them, it would take all day. Um, so what I've listed only really scratches the surface. But these are the most important aspects that I have learned, and I certainly hope to be able to implement these qualities in the future. So, thank you for listening.